What if the world was just one signature away from rewriting the rules of an entire region? Imagine waking up to headlines declaring the birth of a new country in the world's most contentious hotspot, and the threat of war hanging on every word that follows. That's not science fiction. It's the reality at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict right now. The question is, will international pressure finally force change, or is the dream of Palestinian statehood slipping away forever? In the last few weeks, something dramatic has happened on the global stage. Planned visits by foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, some of the Arab world's most influential power brokers, were blocked by Israel. The goal of their trip? To publicly back the recognition of an independent Palestinian state, and to pressure the world's biggest players to make a final push for the two-state solution. If you think this is just another diplomatic spat in a region used to conflict, think again. One leading Arab diplomat called Israel's move a dangerous escalation. And it comes at a moment when more countries are lining up to recognize Palestine. Slovenia, Norway, Ireland, Spain, and heavyweight nations like France may soon follow. But with every step forward, the resistance is fierce. Israel's government has doubled down, announcing new settlements and refusing to let even diplomatic visits proceed. How did we get to this powder keg moment? Why does global recognition matter? And what happens if the two-state solution fails once and for all? To understand where we are now, let's rewind the clock and break down how decades of hope, violence, and political maneuvering brought us to the edge of a historic transformation. The roots of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict stretch back over a century, to a time before Israel was even a state. Competing national movements, Zionism for Jews and Palestinian nationalism for Arabs, clashed over claims to the same land. After the trauma of World War II and the Holocaust, international support grew for a Jewish homeland, culminating in the creation of Israel in 1948. But this came at a tremendous cost. Over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced, sparking cycles of war and resentment that have never truly faded. For decades, the world has watched this conflict with a mixture of hope and frustration. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s promised a new era, two states for two peoples, living side by side in peace. This is the best hope for a just and lasting peace, said then U.S. President Bill Clinton. Yet despite ceremonies and handshakes, the vision of Oslo never became reality. Trust collapsed. Violence returned, most infamously during the Second Intifada from 2000 to 2005, which saw bombings, shootings, and brutal Israeli military operations. Since then, the gap between vision and reality has only widened. Israeli settlements have expanded steadily in the West Bank, changing the geography and demographics on the ground. The Palestinian leadership is deeply divided between the Palestinian Authority, which governs parts of the West Bank, and Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip. With every year, the hope of real negotiations seems to retreat, replaced by cycles of violence and mounting despair. Meanwhile, the international community has been divided over what to do. Some countries recognize Palestine as a state, hoping it will increase pressure on Israel. Others argue that only direct negotiations can bring peace, and that outside recognition is a dead end. The United States has long been the main broker, but American power and credibility have faded after years of failed peace plans. European countries have sometimes stepped in, most recently with France hinting it could recognize Palestine as early as this summer. But here's the emotional punch. For millions of ordinary people, families in Gaza and the West Bank, Israeli civilians living in fear of rockets, the political chess game means daily suffering. The recent war in Gaza has killed thousands, destroyed infrastructure, and pushed the humanitarian crisis to new extremes. As one senior UN official put it, the two-state solution is nearing a point of no return, requiring immediate and irreversible action. Let's bring it back to the present. In the run-up to the high-stakes UN conference scheduled for June 2025, the pressure is building like never before. The foreign ministers who were blocked from visiting Ramallah weren't just making a symbolic gesture. They represented a serious push from the Arab world to demonstrate unity, and to tell Europe and the US, enough waiting. Recognize Palestine now, and force Israel back to the negotiating table. Saudi Arabia, in particular, is preparing to take what could be a historic step. According to Dr. Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian representative to the United Nations, Riyadh is pushing not just for its own recognition of a Palestinian state, but also mobilizing Western countries to do the same. So why did Israel block this visit? According to the Israeli government, the Palestinian Authority's refusal to condemn the October 7th massacre by Hamas makes any diplomatic engagement unacceptable. It's a stance that has infuriated the Arab world, which sees it as an excuse to avoid dialogue and cement a permanent occupation. Hussein al-Sheikh, a senior PLO official, called it unprecedented behavior and an arrogant act. The stakes go far beyond this single diplomatic dispute. As of June 2025, 147 out of 193 UN member states recognize Palestine as a sovereign state. The United Nations General Assembly recently passed a resolution with overwhelming support for Palestine's full membership. Across Europe, public sympathy for the Palestinian cause is at an all-time high. And crucially, France, long seen as a key voice in Western diplomacy, has signaled it is ready to make a dramatic move. President Emmanuel Macron called recognition of Palestine not only a moral duty, but a political necessity to achieve lasting peace. But the Israeli government, led by hardliners who reject the very concept of Palestinian statehood, isn't backing down. On the contrary, they've just announced plans to construct 22 new settlements in the West Bank, a move that many see as a deliberate effort to kill the two-state proposal. Defense Minister Israel Katz minced no words. Recognition of a Palestinian state would be thrown into the dustbin of history. All of this feeds a widening clash between global hopes for peace and the reality on the ground. The International Court of Justice ruled Israel's occupation illegal. The Biden administration still talks up a two-state vision, but Washington's leverage is weaker than ever. Europe's patience is running out. Meanwhile, every month without progress brings more violence and suffering for Israelis and Palestinians alike. It's an emotional, high-stakes standoff where both sides feel the world is about to cross a line with no return. Just listen to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. The two-state solution is nearing a point of no return, requiring immediate and irreversible action. For many, the only hope left is the upcoming UN conference, co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France, where the fate of the two-state solution, and maybe the region itself, could be sealed. Will international recognition force Israel to the table, or will Israel's strategy of blocking diplomacy and building settlements succeed in closing the door on Palestinian statehood forever? The answer to that question could change not just the future of Israel and Palestine, but the entire Middle East, and by extension, the world's delicate balance of power. Are we about to see a new chapter begin, or the tragic end of a decades-old dream? As the world holds its breath, one thing is certain. What happens next will reverberate far beyond the borders of the West Bank and Gaza. And it all comes down to a single burning question. Is the two-state solution still alive, or is it already dead? So, as the diplomatic drama intensifies, the world watches with bated breath. Will the upcoming UN conference in New York become a turning point, or simply another chapter in a frustrating cycle of hope and impasse? Let's look into the possible futures that could emerge from this historic crossroads. Imagine the first scenario, a diplomatic breakthrough. International momentum is building, with 147 out of 193 UN member states already recognizing Palestine. The tide appears to be turning. France, Spain, Norway, Ireland, and now Slovenia have all made their recognition official. French President Emmanuel Macron has even declared that for Paris, recognition is no longer a distant idea, but a political necessity to achieve lasting peace. What if, at the June UN conference, more Western powers make the leap? Picture the headlines. France and Germany jointly recognize Palestine, inspiring a wave of similar moves across Europe. The United States, under mounting international and domestic pressure, pushes Israel to reconsider its policies, perhaps tying aspects of military aid or diplomatic favor to a return to negotiations. Such a scenario would force a dramatic shift in the diplomatic landscape. Suddenly, Israel finds itself increasingly isolated on the world stage. International organizations and forums might start treating Palestine as a full participant rather than an observer. The pressure could become impossible for even the most hawkish Israeli governments to ignore. But here's the catch. Israel's response so far has been defiance. The government not only barred the Arab minister's peace mission to Ramallah, but also announced 22 new settlements in the West Bank, an unmistakable message. What if international recognition surges, but Israel responds with more settlements and pushes back harder? Some analysts warn that unilateral recognition, without a negotiated peace, could fuel further instability. The Palestinian Authority might celebrate diplomatic victories in New York, but back home, daily life remains unchanged. Frustration, disillusionment, and, in the worst case, violence could spiral yet again. In fact, we're already seeing the seeds of this scenario. The International Court of Justice declared the occupation illegal, and the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly supported Palestine's bid for full membership. Yet, in the West Bank and Gaza, hope is scarce on the ground. A third, more troubling possibility is a gradual slide toward a one-state reality. If the two-state solution finally collapses under the weight of failed negotiations and relentless settlement expansion, what then? Many experts warn that a single political entity encompassing both peoples, with deep inequalities embedded in law and practice, could become a grim status quo. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres offered a stark warning. The two-state solution is nearing a point of no return, requiring immediate and irreversible action. If this path is followed, Palestinians might abandon the dream of statehood altogether in favor of equal civil rights within a single state. Some Israeli politicians count on this scenario to quietly cement control over the West Bank, but the result could be years, even generations, of unrest and international condemnation. But let's not ignore the positive potential either. The Arab world's unified stance, Europe's growing resolve, and the global outrage over humanitarian suffering in Gaza have created unprecedented momentum. Could this be the moment when pressure forces a real change, when both parties are finally compelled, by isolation and necessity, to sit at the table? One thing is certain, the stakes have never been higher. As Saudi Arabia and France co-chair the June conference, they carry not only the aspirations of millions of Palestinians, but also the hopes of a world weary of endless conflict in the Holy Land. For viewers like you, why does this matter? The Israeli-Palestinian conflict isn't only a distant quarrel between politicians. Its aftershocks reverberate across global politics, economics, and even the way people perceive justice and international law. A breakthrough, or a breakdown, could reshape alliances, spark new waves of migration, affect global markets, and alter the moral fabric of our time. But there's also a personal angle. This story is a masterclass in the complexity of international diplomacy, where history, identity, and power collide daily. By understanding how recognition, negotiation, and international pressure influence events, you can decode not just this conflict, but the wider patterns of global crises. What does this mean in practice? For one, beware of easy answers. The loudest voices on social media often peddle simplistic narratives. But as we've seen, even seemingly straightforward acts, like recognizing Palestine at the UN, can have unpredictable, far-reaching consequences. Second, remember that genuine change often begins not with grand gestures, but with persistent, coordinated international engagement. The fact that the Arab states were blocked from meeting in Ramallah didn't end their campaign. It made them more determined. Every diplomatic setback is also a lesson. The conflict won't be solved overnight, but each action matters. And finally, the fate of the two-state solution holds a broader warning. Unresolved injustices have a way of returning again and again, demanding attention. Whether it's in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, or elsewhere, international law and the collective will of nations are only as strong as their consistent application. So, will international pressure finally force real change, or has the two-state solution already slipped through our fingers? The answer, frustratingly, is neither a simple yes nor no. The groundwork for peace, international recognition, bold diplomacy, and public support has never been stronger. But without willingness from the key parties to compromise, even the best-laid diplomatic plans risk being undermined by realities on the ground. Yet history teaches us that even the most impossible impasses can be broken, sometimes through a sudden turn of events, sometimes by the slow grinding of diplomatic gears. The upcoming UN conference may not deliver a final solution, but it could set the stage for a new phase, one where global determination finally outweighs local resistance. And here's a secret fact that few outside diplomatic circles realize. For all of Israel's defiance, some of its security and intelligence officials quietly acknowledge that indefinite occupation is unsustainable. Backroom discussions, rarely publicized, are already exploring ways to avoid a one-state deadlock, should international isolation become too costly. In summary, the outcome is not predetermined, but the forces pushing for change are stronger today than they've been in decades. The window for a two-state solution is closing. If world leaders seize this moment, if they move from statements to actions, a negotiated peace is still possible. If not, a new, unpredictable future awaits both peoples and the world. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow our channel for more deep dives into the world's most complex issues. And in the comments, what do you think? Is the two-state solution still alive, or are we witnessing the birth of a new reality in the Middle East?